guys, it is Mike from the Time Rift Arcade. I am so happy to see you guys again. Today I'm working on an Atari Liberator cabinet, and boy, this thing is in just fantastic shape. If you're not familiar with Liberator, I'm not surprised. They only made 762 of these guys, and it was going to be a sequel to their smash hit Missile Command, but unfortunately, due to internal politics, it really just never got off the ground, and so they made 762 and then just kind of quit. And so we have one of them. It's in just absolutely gorgeous shape. I have had to do a little bit of repair to it. I had to put new speakers in. I had to repair the power supply, and the volume pot was not working. I also replaced the marquee backlight. The monitor seems to be in great shape. The blue will kind of come in and out, which I suspect is a cold solder joint on one of the, probably the blue transistor. But it could be something else. It could be the cold solder joint on the input. It could be a loose wire. There's several things it could be. But I think the tube is great. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the chassis out. I'm going to do a complete service on it. So that's going to be a cap kit, and then I'm going to just reflow all of the places where we generally see things, you know, like cold solder joints and things happen, all the headers, all the transistors, especially the blue ones. And I suspect it'll be absolutely gorgeous when we finish that. So follow along and let's get to it. I'm going to start by discharging the tube. I'll do this by just connecting the pins under the anode cup to ground. Removing the chassis is just a matter of removing the two screws and then disconnecting all of the wires from the neck and game PCB. Okay, so before we get started, I want to take just a second and answer the question that I know a lot of you are asking right now, and it is, if the only thing that's really wrong with this chassis is that the blue is coming in and out, and it's probably a cold solder joint, why wouldn't we just tap a little solder on that and call it a day? Why are we going to go ahead and replace all of these capacitors when they seem to be working just fine? Well, the answer to that is that, so the date code on this chassis is 1982, and some of the capacitors are actually have date codes that are even older than that. So like 40 plus years that these capacitors have been running. And if you don't know, electrolytic capacitors are they're made out of like a, for better lack of a better word, they're made out of a foil that's wrapped up with a sandwich layer of electrolyte. And so what happens over the years, that electrolyte dries up, and it's just a matter of time, especially with continuous everyday use, before these capacitors start bulging, pop, and fail. So I'm going to just do a complete service on it so that we never have to worry about that. Last thing I want is this game to be out on the floor, somebody playing it, and it goes down, and then I have to take it off the floor, bring it back to the pub, do a service, and then take it back to the arcade. Let's just take care of it now. I'll remove the capacitors with my Hacko desoldering gun. It's kind of like a solder vacuum, if you will. After removing each capacitor, I always check the value to make sure I remove the correct one and check any previous person's work. If I find a mismatch, it might explain a problem I'm having with the monitor. Now it's just a matter of soldering in the replacement capacitor and then cutting the legs to length. I always make a mark on the top of each cap I have replaced. This helps during the recap process, but it's also a great way to know in the future that I've serviced this monitor before. I keep a list of the capacitors, their values, and their locations, and then check each one off the list as I go. It can be a little bit of a tedious process, but I actually enjoy doing it. It's kind of rewarding bringing these old machines back to life. Sometimes you won't have the exact capacitor you need. If you have a capacitor of a higher voltage value on hand, as long as the capacitance is the same, you can totally substitute it. All right, well that finishes up the replacement of all of the capacitors. Now I'm just going to go in and reflow any of the places where it's very common to get cold solder joints on these chassis. And then I'm also going to just quickly DeOxit all of the pots so that we can just make sure that they're not crusty, and that could be also one of the problems for our blue. Over the life of the machine, these headers will get plugged and unplugged hundreds of times. This stress can cause cracks in the solder or even break the traces on the boards. It's always a good idea to reflow them when servicing a chassis. These red, green, and blue transistors on the neck PCB are notorious for having cold solder joints. They tend to get hot, and the cycling of the heat can be really hard on the board. Here I will spray some DeOxit on the red, green, blue adjustment pots and then turn them a few times. This is preventative, but a crusty pot might just be the cause of our blue going in and out. I'll put a service note on the neck PCB insulators so that I will know the last time I worked on this chassis and what I did to it. Lastly, we just need to reinstall the chassis and power it back up. Wow. Okay, this is one of those occasions where I just really didn't think the cap kit would make all that much difference. I mean, I've done a lot of cap kits over the years, and you know, sometimes it makes a difference and sometimes it's preventative maintenance, right? But oh my gosh, this monitor looks brand new. Like, it was washed out before, and now all of the colors are like really crisp. The whites are really white. I'm just blown away by the result of this work. And so, I mean, it could have been some of the reflow, it could have been other things, but it's most likely the cap kit. I'm going to turn the lights off and play a little bit of the game so you can see it maybe a little better on the phone, or on the camera, I mean. And wow, I'm amazed. Okay, well, I have got a couple more things to do. I'm gonna do those off camera. I've got to fix the bezel and put the smoke glass back in, just do a little bit more cleaning, and then we're gonna wrap this thing up and put it in storage. I hope that you come play it this summer at the Time Rift Arcade.